Good afternoon, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Today we'll look at Session Initiation Protocol or SIP. This is the last topic of our module 5, the multimedia protocols. Last class we looked at RTP, real-time transfer protocol. RTP was primarily used for the voice conversation. This assumed that all the work or preparatory work to set up the call, do things up, which port, which machine, which IP address, all has been worked out. And now we can start talking. But before you can do a talk, to communicate with each other, we need to do all that. Let us look at our basic phone call. When you call somebody on phone, you just don't select a number and start talking. You select their number, you dial, you see tune to some tone, his sound going on, then sometimes you see announcements, and then if the person is available, you do hear ringback tone, train, or whatever, ringback music, and when finally person answers, then you start talking. Now from the time you dial up till the person answers, it could be 1 second, could be 1 minute, depending on how the network works. So that means before you can communicate in voice, you need to do session setup, call setup. And the phase of call setup is what is dealt with by signaling protocol. In telecom world, that is handled by SS7, called signaling system number 7. When you do voice over IP call or video voice over IP, we need some protocol to set up the session. And that is signaling protocol and internet world. That protocol is called SIP or SIP. So primary job of SIP is to do the session setup and initiate the call. So when SIP was designed, its long-term vision, what it wanted to be, what it wanted to achieve, was that all telephone calls, all voice conversations, all video conferencing should be done on internet. You don't need a separate telecom structure because setting up a new telecom structure is a lot more costlier. Setting up once IP network is set up, offering services is a lot more easier. Secondly, now when you have an email address, xyz@google.com or gmail.com, it does not matter whether you are using the Gmail at your home, at your college, or your friend's place, your ID is the same, you are known by your email address. It doesn't matter where you are. But let us look at traditional telephone line, your landline telephone number. If you leave your house, your telephone is not available to you. So telephone number not only fixes your identity, but it also fixes the location. You can't change it. When you look at the mobile phone number, you can be anywhere. So it only identifies you and not the location. So same way, when you're trying to call somebody on internet, reach somebody, how do we identify that? So each person should be identifiable by some means, and that is also the goal that what you wanted to basically achieve. You can identify them by email. You can identify them with by phone number or other thing else. But if you fix a fixed number changes, carrier goes down, you are in trouble. So you like to have a unique address, or you could have multiple instead you would like to be identified. Further, when you wanted to reach a Kali meaning the person you want to connect to, the person you want to call. Subject to that Kali is will like to take a call. If you want to call me on phone, and if I don't want to take the call, there is no way you can call me. So assuming your call is willing to take a call, then it does not matter where the Kali is. Now when you do WhatsApp, it does not matter whether you are in Bangalore or Delhi or even US or some other country. As long as your network connectivity, your WhatsApp work person who is trying to call you, talk to you, doesn't even know where you are. You are identified by your number or name, and that's it. Same way, no matter where the call is roaming, somewhere else should still be reachable. And doesn't even matter whether the person is using an iPad or an iPhone or an Android phone or a laptop or a desktop or a fixed phone, whatever, you would like to reach that. And this is what the vision with which the SIP actually started. The way SIP was designed, protocol was very similar to HTTP. HTTP as a protocol is in ASCII. That means as a human, you can read the entire communication, what is being communicated. HTTP follows a request response model. Basically, you make a HTTP request through GET or through POST, and you get a response back. Then you can make another request and so on, so forth. But resemblance stops in terms of format and query response model. Look at your internet application. Even though the application were to be used by human, but they were not designed for a real-time communication. The end entities were kind of still the application. When I send an email, my browser or my client, email client, will send a mail to mail server and it will lie in the mailbox of the user. When will user read that email? Sender has no clue. And at times, you're expecting a quick response. You send an email, forward something, and person doesn't reply, you end up calling. Yeah, I sent you an email, can you look at it? That means person is not even interested. So emails, even the browsing, whether you use a browser or a web application that talks to backend and get data, download, you do video, is not a human involved. So in that sense, SIP is designed to serve human-to-human real-time communication and not the end delivery being machine like email and other things. So what does SIP basically gives me? SIP gives you 5 capabilities. One is you should be able to make a call whichever location user is in or whatever device user is using. Whether user is using an iPhone or is using the Android phone or using an iPad or a laptop, as long as the devices support voice or video call, you should be able to communicate. Second, if user is willing, then you should be able to talk. That means there should be some way available to you to know whether user is available or not. For example, you may say, all my office colleague business will talk to me only office time and not otherwise. So when caller tries to call such a user, caller should get information, look, user is available, not available, and what could be the reason. It could be away from office, business, holiday trip, whatever. That SIP should provide that. Third capability is different users may have different media choices. And we'll look at that in a short while. Some user would like to communicate using raw voice digital channel of 64 kbps. Some other media will do the, let's say, ALA or MULA of, not ALA, MULA, there's the 13 kbps of GSM coding or LPC, linear predictive coding of even lower bandwidth and so on, so forth. Some user would say, I will talk only audio but not video. So all this should be supported. Like you just get up in the morning and somebody wants a video call. You say, no, wait, I don't want to make a video call, I can do audio. Because you do not want anyone to see your face and what condition you are in. So depending on the user, it should communicate what kind of media user would like to have, whether you want to both audio, video, or only audio, something of that kind. Having done all that, when you need to make a call, one finally need to know the endpoint number or the socket port on which the data has to take place. So that identification. And lastly, session management. During the call, you want to put on hold. During the call, you want to add third party. Or let's say you are at the home phone, but now trying to move to the car. So you want to transfer a call from your iPad to your mobile phone. You should be able to transfer. So all session management activities should be supported, and these are the capabilities that is expected from SIP. So typically the way SIP works, normally in any way in the call, what you do, you dial the number, callee gets alerted meaning his phone rings, and when the callee answers, you probably get to know that callee has answered, and then you can start talking. In telephony world, you know person by number. In internet world, we probably know only by email. Now with email, how do I really talk? Because talk happens directly between A and B with their IP addresses. So there has to be some way to figure out what is the current IP address. Not even that. Because most of us use DHCP, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, to get our IP address. And with the least time, the address might even change. You are in the office, you have one IP address, you come home with your own home Wi-Fi server, you get a different DHCP IP address. So how does, that means your address is not fixed. It could keep on changing. So how does caller know what is your current IP address? And that should be able to determine or provided by SIP. And if you have multiple devices, user can prefer that first try to reach me on iPad, then on the phone, or then on the laptop or whatever, some other region. The other capability we're trying to look at given. So let us look at a very, very simplistic overview of how a SIP call works. In this diagram, Alice with an IP address of 167.180.112.24 wants to do a voice conversation with Bob. Address is 193.64.210.89. So first Alice sends a message like call setup. Alice sends a SIP invite message. The client sends an invite message to the Bob's computer at the IP address saying invite Bob at this IP address. But now we said that SIP has to identify, assuming the address is known, Alice want to say what kind of media Alice would want and what is the Alice address and what is the port number on which Alice is willing to receive the audio call. So all this information is provided as part of my invite message. So it says C is equal to IN IP4 That meaning says it is my internet address following IPv4 standard, and my IP address is given as part of the 167, whatever something. It also saying media is equal to audio. That means Alice wants to set up audio call at the port number 38060. So Alice would have a RTP server running on this port, and Alice is saying, for media communication, for my audio communication, I would like to use RTP protocol, and encoding is AVP0, which basically means PCM MULA, which is 64 kbps bandwidth. When Bob received this message, and Bob was willing to take the call, Bob responds with 200K OK message. This is very similar to what happens in HTTPK. Status code description. The basic syntax is copied from HTTP. I mean, test is working fine, so why to reinvent the wheel and work with that? So Bob sends 200 OK message to the Alice, indicating his IP address and indicating, yes, I'd like to do audio. And Bob audio port number is 48753. That means when Alice needs to send a RTP stream of voice, the destination would be 48753, whereas when Bob needs to send voice as a RTP stream, the destination port at Alice would be 38060. And Bob says, look, my encoding is using RTP stream, but AVP3. AVP3 meaning I would prefer GSM encoding. So if both agrees, if not, they need to renegotiate, re-invite. This negotiations happens, but assuming this is done, that anytime Alice would send voice sample, Alice would encode using AVP3, which is GSM encoding. But anytime Bob sends a voice sample, Bob will send using AVP0, meaning PCM channel mule at 64K. So you can look out, whenever Bob sends, Bob would be sending at the rate of 64 kbps. Whenever Alice will send the voice, Alice is sending voice at the rate of 13 kbps, because that is what Bob has specified. Assuming their exchange parameters are accepted, then Alice has to send an OK message, which basically indicating ready for conversion, and that message is called ACK message. Only after receiving an ACK message, the two sides can start talking. So first one, which says MULA audio, which is Alice has indicated she would like the MULA audio 64 kbps. So this message is from Bob. So this is the stream from Bob to Alice on port number, Alice port number, using 64 kbps MULA. When Alice sends a voice, Alice voice goes at GSM, because that is what Bob has indicated, RTP as AVP3 and port number 48753. So two different streams. Bob is transmitting using 64 kbps, but Alice is transmitting at 13 kbps, different encoding. Of course, if they want to change the encoding during the session, that also could be done. But this basically gives you a very basic call flow on the SIP. How does the SIP would really work? These port numbers 38060 or 48753, whatever the RTP port numbers, this is randomly. But SIP message has a destination fixed port, which is 5060 or 5060. So both Alice and Bob computer would use the port number 5060 to send the SIP messages to each other. We have seen a very simplistic successful overcase, but actually a lot more things may happen behind the scene, negotiation, kind of media, use of proxy, other messages, which we'll look at them in a short while. So we looked at how to set up a call using the IP address, very simple case. And from there you can look at, you are basically saying SIP is an out-of-band protocol. Anyone like to say why it is called out-of-band protocol? We discussed that while discussing FTP protocol. So given this scenario, why is SIP an out-of-band protocol? Anyone before I start taking names? Dikshita, Pratiksha, Rekha, anyone, what is an out-of-band protocol? Counterpart is in-band protocol. And I gave you example, FTP is the out-of-band protocol, where we look at HTTP, email, POP3, these are all in-band protocols. What is the key difference between implementation-wise FTP protocol versus other which I said, HTTP, SMTP, POP3? What is the key difference? Each protocol you exchange data. But the way the data is exchanged, FTP put it differently. Shashank? Nobody is there?
Sir, FTP has parallel connections.
Can you elaborate more on that? I mean, answer is partially right, just I want you to elaborate so that I can clarify. Anyone else? Sindhu? Sudhakar? Sri Vidya? Sujay? Sujay, are you there?
Yes, sir.
So tell me how FTP is different from other protocols. How does FTP work? Shaktivel,
Yes, sir.
how does FTP work?
Sir, FTP is used to transfer the files, sir.
True, but how does it work? There is a description. What is the protocol? The way protocol work, what happens? If you need to transfer a file, what are the FTP protocol commands? What happens?
Sir, using FTP files, so we can upload or download the files, sir.
Again, describing, so what happens? I'm asking you, what are the messages and how does file get, what are the messages you deliver? Protocol specifications. You are talking generics.
Sir, FTP uses port number for communication.
Every
And that's
application is port number, but can you elaborate a bit more?
Sir,
it doesn't
FTP
use
has, sir, FTP takes two connections. One is control connection and one is for file transfer.
Good. So, which is not the case with other applications. So control connection is used for what? To know the authentication, to know the file name, to communicate the port number on which file to be transferred, and then a separate data connection is made to transfer the file content. Now, out of this, one we have the control connection, other is the actual data transfer. Which one is out of band and which one is in band? Sasank,
No idea, sir. Only that much I know.
Dikshita,
So the first one's using port number, it tells which port to communicate to. That is out of band.
okay, yeah. So the control connection is already considered as out of band. In band is the band or channel on which you do data transfer. If you use any other channel which does not do data transfer, that is called out of band. So let's look at our SIP or our voice communication. These three messages are exchanged on port number 5060. And on these SIP messages, there is no data transfer. Data transfer happens on separate ports, in fact, two separate streams on which actual voice, which is called data, goes. So this is my data channel, the SIP is a control channel, and because using a different channel than where the data get transferred, that's why it is called out-of-band signaling protocol. Any questions? We looked at the basic SIP communication. Because we get different socket, different ports, they're ASCII, all internet protocols are designed to be ASCII initially so that human can read and debug and diagnose easily. And we already said like 2-3-digit status code, ASCII format, request response model. So they resemble very much like HTTP. Other things SIP required says every message has to be acknowledged, and that is what happens. So invite, we finally get an ACK, or we may get an ACK if thing doesn't happen. Being a request response model, and we just negotiate, and call we want to be real time. So anything you like to do real time, get it done. You don't want TCP because that could cause delays. So normally SIP runs on UDP, but it could run on TCP as well. And as you've seen in the case, when using RTP, there are two different streams. One is for the Bob and other is for the Alice. So both sides of entity have their own different streams, and you need to look at that part, which is not the case otherwise. Other thing you might have noticed in the communication is the codec or the encoding negotiation. Now, Alice is saying she would prefer 64 kbps PCM with MULA encoding. Bob doesn't have that. And Bob cannot, let's say, even send data at the rate of PCM channel. Bob says, my bandwidth is low. I would like to get a coding on GSM encoding, but I can send it higher encoding. My challenge is receiving part. But if Bob can't even send data at the PCM MULA encoding, then Bob would respond with 606 saying, look, I cannot support this channel, but I have a different channel which I can support. And Bob lists his encoders, what encoding media is available to Bob. Now when Alice looks at that and see what is available, Alice would send a new invite message saying, okay, this is a new invite, the port number, these are the encoding, and because Bob has already indicated, then Bob can use that. And that's how the setup really happens. If Bob doesn't want to accept a call, for whatever reason, so Bob will reject the call saying, no, I'm not available. It may be busy, it may be outside, or he say, to talk to me, you better pay me the money. So those of you know probably 900 number calls, when you make a call, you may pay heavy money, the entertainment calls, those kind of industry. Or sometimes you get a message, do not disturb me, I cannot be called, disturbing, whatever the reasons are. Even though in general, SIP works in conjunction with RTP, but it is not mandatory that one has to use RTP. In the message, you can indicate other protocol, but same could be used. So today is only RTP, but doesn't mean you are restricted to RTP as SIP is concerned. Other media protocols can also be used, and you don't have to upgrade or modify SIP protocol per se. Anytime you need to call somebody, we need the address to reach. Like in the case of phone, we have phone number. In the email address. Similarly, SIP addresses are more like email address. All you put it in, you say SIP : the email address. And in general, you don't put an IP address because IP address could be keep on changing depending upon where you are. Other thing, most of the time, the user may not be directly reachable. Because keep changing, his address is not fixed, so may not even know. So you do some kind of indirect mechanism. Let's say I'm a user, I'm in my office, I have my phone, iPad, laptop, and I would prefer that my call should come only on the iPad. So I need to basically somehow update my proxy agent front end. Look, any call comes to me, give it to my iPad. So each SIP agent would have what is called a proxy representation, a proxy server for each user, and call typically will go to proxy, and proxy will forward the call to the final user depending on where things are. Even though we say the hello, can you hear me? There is a minor blip.
Yes, sir.
Okay, there was a minor blip for about, I think, 30 seconds. If I want to specify in the email, normally say mail to and give an email address. So whenever user clicks on the mail to icon, your mail client opens. Same way in the website, web page, you can include SIP : and the email address. And if you click, your SIP agent would start and start making a call. And that's how you can basically start defining SIP addresses, publicize yourself. And message would be sent and things will happen. This is the example of basically invitation message, giving some idea how the headers are. It says invite Bob at, so invite is the first call setup message. It's saying this is the destination address, Bob at whatever domain, SIP protocol version 2.0, via meaning from where the call is coming using SIP 2.0 on UDP, and this is the IP address. And then the other headers from, to, call ID, content type, content length. So content type says application HDP. HDP is session description protocol. I mean, we are using SIP to do this signaling management. But you want to tell the world, look, tomorrow we would have a conference at 3 p.m. This is the IP address available. This is the process you to log in, and will be available only in this particular encoding and whatever. And we'll discuss this particular topic. So you want to describe the session details. And that is the content you're looking at in the SIP, what kind of call it is. And content length indicate the length of the content message. We have shown only part of it, but you can say it's a client IP address is so and so using IPv4. If it is IPv6, it will give IPv6 address. It says use audio with AVP0 meaning following PCM MULA, and content type says application HDP meaning session description protocol. So typical SIP has lot more messages, but that's beyond the scope of our discussion. There's a whole book available, like the book you see in the network course. There's a whole book available that talk about SIP only. The SIP is that much complicated and that much detail. So we're getting a very, very small overview. Now we don't know the IP address, So how do we need to get the IP address? So basically talk to the proxy server, and proxy would somehow indicate or find the IP address and then send it. And that's the way SIP basically works. But because we have the caller has only caller's name or email address, but to make a call, I need to get the caller's IP address. And why do you need an IP address? Because IP address could be keep on changing. Maybe because of DHCP, maybe because user is changing devices, different devices, or different places, hence the address might change. So we want to know, or user may be available both the devices simultaneously, but you prefer to get one, so which one to get? So update the IP address, which caller doesn't know. So we need some kind of support that keeps tracks of, tells us what is the current IP address, or we talk to that particular proxy server. It's something like when you want to go and meet a principal of a college or any office, you don't go to meet the boss of the office directly. You go to the reception. Reception acts as a proxy, identifies you, verifies you, and then it directs you to connect to the boss or something of that kind. Same way SIP would work. And boss may say, a person may say, look, I could be available, my public time is 3 to 4, or I don't want to accept the call from so and so. At this time, I take call from family. So depending on preferences, proxy would know all that, and subject to your constraints, proxy will only forward the call when they're willing to accept. Even you're going to talk into voicemail, retrieve your email, and other stuff. So how does SIP proxy work? It's basically another function of the SIP method, which acts on behalf of the user. So when Alice needs to set up a call with Bob, Alice will send a message to her proxy server, because her SIP proxy server should know what kind of device Alice is using. And this proxy server would basically forward this message to Bob's proxy server. And that proxy server, Bob, will basically forward to the user and get a response. Or proxy may return Bob IP address, and then you can make a call and things would happen. You can look at this very similar to DNS. When you type a URL in the browser, you type google.com, your browser behind the scene talks to DNS server, get the IP address of google.com, and then you set up a TCP connection. So very similar way SIP basically would work. Now we are saying the proxies would know, but how does proxy know where the callee is? Because unless callee informs, it becomes difficult. Like we all carry cell phone, when you move from one place to another, from home to college to cafeteria, some other place, we keep changing our location. So whenever we change the location, the signaling tower sends a LU message called location update message to the HLR saying where the user is currently in this particular set. So that a call comes, then call could be directed to that particular region rather than everywhere. Same way, a user always basically talks to registrar, and proxy will talk to registrar to know where the user is. So update the location, update the device type. A user, when connect to a particular machine or a device, sends a register message, indicates I'm using this device via SIP2, this is my current IP address, where which device user is using, and identify user itself and whatever, and says this is available to only for 1 hour, that's 3600 seconds. If timer expires and user doesn't move, the device will send another renewal message, something very much like DHCP what you do. And now the registrar knows where the Bob is, and essentially we are saying every SIP user has an associated registrar. Like every domain, you have a respective domain name server which tells you what the IP address is. Same way for every SIP user, there would be a SIP registrar which would know what the current IP address of the user. So essentially, registrar keeps track of the current IP address of the user, and whenever user will change one device to another, or even when DHCP lease renewal occurs, and when DHCP IP address changes, it again updates the register saying, this is my new IP address, or this is my new device type. It indicates both. And even if I'm not changing, but my lease expiry happens, I would do a refresh message indicating I'm still here, the mail could daily come in. So you can look at registrar very, very analogous to authoritative DNS server. Authoritative DNS server means that DNS server knows where exactly the IP address of a machine is. Same way, registrar always knows where the user is because user always registers with the registrar. And then the proxy server would send the message to the registrar, and then the things will basically work out. So let us look at the call flow. How does call flow happens in the presence of proxy as well as the registrar? So we have two users, let's say Jim, two authors, example, the Jim Kuros and Keith Ross. So Jim is at UMass, Keith Ross, though officially is Polytechnic Virginia, but let's say is currently moved to a conference in Europe, attending Eurocom conference. Now, how does it communicate when Jim Kuros wants to set up a voice call with Keith? So Kuros PC will send the invite message to the SIP proxy of UMass, the SIP proxy of the Jim Kuros. Now, this SIP proxy of the caller, Jim Kuros, sends an invite message to the registrar saying, I would like to know where this Keith is. And Keith returns saying current proxy server, proxy address of Keith is currently not in Polytechnic Virginia, but attending a conference at Eurocom, and this is the new proxy address for the Keith. Now this Jim's proxy server sends an invite message to the SIP proxy at the European. The SIP proxy will forward this message to the Keith, who will respond back. And once all the communicated, now Jim knows the IP address of Keith, and now these two machines would directly talk on RTP using whatever the two channels, one from Jim to Keith, one is from Keith Ross to Jim Kuros, so two different channels, and this communication happens directly. Once the voice is started, the SIP server, proxy server can even crash, but call won't get impacted because call already been set up. So in a nutshell, that is how a call actually goes through. So looking at SIP, we basically said it is a signaling protocol whose job is to initiate and terminate a voice call. SIP can be used both for voice as well as video. Even it can also be used for text-based messaging, though very, very unlikely. And about 10 years ago, SIP was a dominant multimedia, at least voice communication protocol, that if you look at the corporate office, which has IP phones, they were all supporting SIP, Cisco phones, other internet company phones, they're all talking SIP. Now today with the other devices being proliferated and concept of desktop phones going away, we all talk about mobile or laptop. So maybe SIP is not that actively being used today, but still as really was at that time dominant, and we have a lot of SIP devices. And it can be used for even instant messaging, but now we use for Skype or WhatsApp. So WhatsApp will become de facto instant messaging communication, and WhatsApp is proprietary. It doesn't follow this. So there may be some open protocol that will happen, then you implement, but as of now, it's all proprietary. So what kind of other services SIP provides other than the voice? One is called call forwarding, like you can forward, when you dial a 800 number, which is let's say toll-free number, Actually, the real number is something else. So person registered with the databases and toll-free number is mapped to the real number and call is forwarded there. You can also do call forwarding like you do on phone. Do not disturb, forward the call to this, or no answer, forward call to this, or forward all my calls because I'm going to my friend's place. So forward all my calls to that number. So SIP even provides that kind of capability support. Of course, personal mobility and kind of device a user has got, indicating all kind of devices, all kind of encoding scheme that could be available. If you want authentication to verify that who the caller says caller is and who the callee says callee is, to make sure that there is no fake person using it, it also provides for authentication. You can even do multicasting conferences, and today we don't use it anymore. Very rarely you find people using fax, but SIP does provide fax support as well. So this brings to the end of our SIP protocol discussion. Just to summarize, we started with SIP overview, which said the signaling protocol, which is an out-of-band protocol. To set up a call, we send an invite message. The protocol structure-wise is very much like HTTP, which is basically ASCII, request-response messages, status code follows 3 digits, but the stability ends. The SIP is designed for real-time end-to-end communication, but HTTP can be used for HTTP streaming real time, but primary HTTP is machine to machine, even though the end user could be human, but this may not be real time. Then we look at two SIP other functions called SIP proxy and SIP registrar, and then the other services SIP provides like call forwarding, authentication, personal mobility, and so on and so forth. So this brings to the end of our today's last topic of our module 5. From next topic onwards, next class, we'll go to network security, that will be module 4. Any questions, please feel free to ask, or you can drop on the next class.